Lord be with you.
And also with you.
My sisters and brothers, this is a proclamation of the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Jesus saw the crowd, he went up the mountain, and after he had sat down, his disciples came to him. He began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you, and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven." My sisters and brothers, this is the good news of our salvation.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today, here in our parish, we're observing the Solemnity of All Saints. And it's fortunate that we have such an upbeat celebration, such an upbeat solemnity towards the end of the liturgical year before we get into the new liturgical year. As human beings, we're all creatures of habit. We celebrate the same feasts, fast the same fasts, and yet each year, hopefully, something new may come to our mind, to the forefront of our lives, that will serve as food for meditation. Now, when you think of All Saints, I remember the engraving in the Baltimore Catechism and in my St. Joseph Missal back in the Dark Ages of these men and women dressed in white flowing robes with halos around this paradise. But we can't have cookie cutter saints. They all lived peculiar lives. And I don't mean peculiar strange, I mean peculiar particular to each one. They all had one thing in common though, their rule of life, which was the imitation of Christ. C.S. Lewis, in his Screwtape Letters, I've never heard that, said, and I'm quoting him because I found this interesting, "When they are totally his," meaning Christ's, "they will be more themselves than ever." So when we're trying to know a saint, yes, it's nice to know a little bit about their life, but we should look at the way in which they died. Their death reminds us of the true meaning of life, which is the call to eternal happiness through the imitation of Christ. We all like to think that we imitate Christ, and maybe we do in our own little way, our own imperfect way. And that's what our life of conversion is all about, to continually improve on imitating Christ. But it's very difficult. In the 1990s, maybe you all would remember, there was a big fad, and there were 4 letters that were plastered on everything from plastic bracelets to t-shirts to baseball caps to you know what. They were WWJD. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What would Jesus do? We ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? But I'm wondering, they beat a dead horse to death with this WWJD everywhere, every place. And it got to be a recipe for being nice. what would Jesus do? Be nice. Make nice. You could hear your parents and teachers saying, play nice in the sandbox. Be nice to your neighbor. Be nice to your friends. That's all kind of saccharine and sweet. And Jesus was everything but saccharine and sweet. As a matter of fact, he could be very blunt. He said, pick up your cross and come follow me. There's nothing really nice about that, or sweet. But follow him where? To the resurrection? Okay. But in order to get to Easter Sunday, we have to go through what? Good Friday. I'm going to quote a woman that I've never really quoted because I kind of had a difficult time liking her. But after I read a little bit about her story and realized that we are all a product of our lives, I see her in a different light and with a lot more compassion. I guess that's my way of trying to imitate Christ. And it's the late Mother Angelica of EWTN fame. And she was a quirky, crusty old woman who minced no words. And she irritated a lot of people and ruffled a lot of feathers. And this quotation of hers is really great. And it says, and I quote, "Holiness is not for wimps, and the cross is not negotiable, sweetheart. It's a requirement." I can just imagine her saying that in her little studio. So we really can't put the sugar and spice of what would Jesus do with the cross. It's kind of difficult to wrap our heads around that. And it's not to say that Jesus doesn't understand us, because he does. He didn't live our particular crosses. We all have our different crosses to bear. But Jesus, being fully human and fully divine, understands the pain. But while Jesus didn't live the things that we have, the saints may have. And today I'd like to give you 3 little vignettes of saints, 2 blessed and 1 saint. One known to me, one that I just found out. The first one is Blessed Father Martín Martínez Pascual. That's a mouthful. And he's from Spain. He was barely 25 years old and had been ordained only 14 months before he was captured by the Spanish militia. The Spanish militia were the soldiers of Generalissimo Francisco Franco of the Spanish Revolution in the 30s, late 20s, early 30s. I remember my grandmother, who was Spanish, telling me about that situation. It was a time of rampant anti-clericalism and anti-Catholicism. She told me that she would remember hearing that convents and monasteries were destroyed. Many priests and nuns were raped, tortured, and killed. Some forced to leave their cloisters, much as they did during the French Revolution. Father Martín was arrested, tortured, and sentenced to the firing squad. I don't have a picture of him here, but imagine a 25-year-old boy with the oils barely dry on his hands, a very innocent look, facing a peloton of firing squad. They asked him, because they couldn't see him, they couldn't bear to look at him, they asked him to turn around so they could shoot him in the back. And he said no. And then when asked what his final words were, he said, and I quote, "I only give you my blessing and ask that God does not take into account the madness that you are committing." And with his last breath, he shouted, "Viva Cristo Rey!" "Long live Christ the King," and he was shot. The next one, known to me, someone that I met in my prayers, is Blessed Miguel Pro, a Mexican, a Jesuit. Miguel was born and raised in Mexico. He joined the Jesuits at a time when Mexico was also undergoing its own revolution in the late 20s. Anti-clericalism and anti-Catholicism again was rampant. And to be caught in clerical garb in the streets or ministering, publicly or privately, were grounds for imprisonment and maybe even death. Miguel would go from house to house to celebrate Mass and administer the sacraments. But one day he was caught, and as suspected, he was imprisoned and sentenced to death. He had been flying under the radar for so long, and the authorities were really ticked off at him, and they wanted an example. And they trumped up charges against him of threatening to bomb and kill a former Mexican president. Miguel was known as a member of the movement called the Cristeros, the Christers. And these were Catholic men, women, and children who fought for their rights to be Catholic. As he faced the firing squad, right before they shot him, he yelled, "Viva Cristo Rey." He was beatified in 1988 by John Paul II. The last example is a very moving one. A very young boy, Saint Jose Luis Sanchez, no relation, del Rio. He was also a member of the Cristero movement, and he too was imprisoned after providing cover for retreating Cristero soldiers at the end of a battle. He was not even 15 years old yet. When he was captured, his captors gave him the opportunity to recant his faith, but he said no. He said, "You caught me, but I'm not going to stop. I just ran out of ammunition." He was beaten and tortured and made to walk 10 blocks to his execution after he was cut on the soles of his feet from the toes all the way back. Once there, his executioners whacked at him with machetes throughout the neck, the back, and the chest. And still, he shouted, "Viva Cristo Rey," with every whack that he received. Finally, he was shot in the head. He was declared a martyr by John Paul II, beatified by Benedict XVI, and declared a saint less than a month ago by Pope Francis. These three saints are not well known to us here in America. And these are not the only ones. We think of saints as people who have been declared such by an ecclesial body and canonized and have churches named after them and have a day that we celebrate their life. But there are many. To be a saint doesn't mean that you have to be canonized, but rather we aspire to be members of that community, of the communion of saints. And there are millions and millions and millions of people in heaven. Our parents, our wives, our husbands, our brothers, sisters, friends. The wonderful thing about the Beatitudes that we heard today is that they're not granted. They're already there. They are already ours. They have been ours. They are a blueprint, if you will, of holiness. They are the promises given to us by Jesus. So as we enter the new church year in a few weeks, let us say yes to Jesus. And let us meditate on those Beatitudes and see just how we are living that blueprint, so that at some day you and I can see each other in heaven and say, I know you. And may the same Lord give us all his peace.